Hello and welcome back to Rocket Pod. So for today's episode, we are joined by the brilliant Johnson Beharry VC, Shaun Blackwood and Rupert Bravery as we discuss their journeys and venture with the JBVC Foundation, who are on a mission to rebuild lives beyond gang culture. We join the conversation now.
Yeah, so basically, because of my background, I mean, coming from the Caribbean, coming here to this country, England, life was pretty tough, even in Grenada, growing up, and coming to England, it was probably about 20 to 30% better when I just came here in '99. I spent some time on the streets, involved in drugs and gang and that side of life, illegal stuff. And I decided that's not the way I was brought up back in Grenada. So I decided I wanted to get out of that environment. So I joined the army to get away from the life I was living. Within 3.5 years of being in the military, my whole life changed.
Okay.
Because my action in Iraq led me to receive the Victoria Cross, which was well received in this country.
That's incredible.
I mean, the way I was treated after I received the Victoria Cross by the British public is, even still today, is amazing. So I wanted to give something back, but I was working with loads of charity, helping loads of charity. And personally, I didn't believe that the money I was raising was going to the cause I wanted to, or they say it was going to.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided, well, maybe I should do it for myself. And Rupert been with me from day one. I spoke to him about it. I said to him, look, I want to set up the JBVC Foundation. I didn't really know how I was going to develop the JBVC Foundation and which direction I was going to go. I tried different pilot scheme to see how it would work. I didn't really have a clear direction on how I was going to work with young people. So I tried different aspects, different pilot scheme. And it come to me that probably it's best to help the people that are left behind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the JBVC Foundation take the direction it has today, working with young people in drugs and gang and knife crime.
I just got goosebumps, actually. I just got goosebumps, saving the people that you left behind, because that's very powerful. That's very, very powerful right there.
I'd be interested to understand, so these kind of people that you're trying to help that have gone into gang, what kind of, and from your experience, what do these people go through to start getting into these gangs? Why do they follow that path?
It's not clear cut on direction and why young people end up in that direction. It's lots of different aspects in their life. It could be bullied, it could be life at home, it could be friends, it could be loads of different things. In my case, it was friends.
Yeah. Because
I was new to this country, and the friends I had, and actually the group of friends that I developed, there was smoking and drinking, which was not miles and miles away from my background growing up in the Caribbean, because in the Caribbean, people drink and smoke, you know about it, but I never, done it myself, smoking, but drinking, that was just normal in the Caribbean. But for young people here, I mean, again, it's still difficult to pinpoint what is the core problem of the issue, why they end up there. Fingers pointing is, I think, is fair to say, probably home problem, peer pressure, the friends you keep. And again, the people who involve in drugs are quite high up, recruit young people to work for them.
Yeah.
And the way they do it is pretty simple. They will hang around schools. They would look at the kids that are a bit more underprivileged than others. They'll start talking to them. They'll offer them things. And then slowly that one mobile phone or a pair of trainers that they offer them grow into something else. So it's a work in progress. It's not just, it's happening straight away. In my case, on the street, I probably was one of them that used to recruit, but not me direct. I had people doing that for me.
Right.
Because I never, being on the street running around, I had people doing that for me. So I think it's fair to say is actually around that kind of direction for young people getting into crime. So you could say, to recap, bullying, peer pressure, the friends they keep, problem at home, wanting certain things in life and they cannot get it and it's been offered by others.
Yeah.
Again, which would lead them onto doing illegal stuff.
I guess there's different motivations, but there's the belonging to be part of a family, maybe. It's the short-term gain of material things. But I think it sounds like there's not, I guess, this, Rupert was talking about risk assessment, that it's so short-term that they don't think about where it might lead them.
Well, society today everything is short-term. What you see and you want, you just want to get it.
Yep.
And the easy access and easiest road to get it is that route, getting involved in illegal stuff. So the short term is appealing. The long term, no one sees the long term when coming for, especially young people. I don't think they think that far ahead.
So it's an honest you and I have had a number of honest conversations in the past, and just to background for the others, often Shaun and I are discussing things which sometimes people are afraid to do because they're afraid of how people might view them or make assumptions about them. But as Shaun keeps telling me, we need to have the difficult conversations if we're to get to the truth, and if we are to move on and make society. Because we've been at this from the start, and I've never asked you this question. Why did you ask me to run the charity and share it?
If I go back to how we met, we met in a school.
Yep.
Years and years ago. I was doing a speech,
yep.
And this kid came up to me and asked about the military and how to join. And I said to him, I think I asked him what was his age. And then I said to him, he should focus on his education. The military could come, anytime after in his life, but education is first. I mean, without education, you cannot get what you want. And at the end of the speech, I was mingling, and this man came up to me and said, "Oh, that's the best thing you could ever say to him because he don't listen to anyone."
By the way.
And we started speaking, and I think very quick we realized we both have the same interests. We both petrol head. I think our relationship from there, because we was in contact. I was invited by Rupert. I think that's the hook was when he invited me to McLaren. And I think that's the hook. And from there on, we always, I think if I look at all the years we know in each other, our relationship from day one and today is probably the same. And when Rupert was my best man in my wedding as well. So we take it, and developing the foundation. It started by a conversation about, I wanted to set up the JBVC Foundation, the direction I'm thinking about taking. And I think everything just gelled into each other.
Yeah, probably because well, you know what I'm like, James. I started telling him how we should organise it. The reason I asked that question, because I've never asked him before, is because the first time I met Shaun, this is a segue into Shaun. The first time I met Shaun, when we were interviewing you about being our lead caseworker, Shaun asked me one of the most insightful questions I've been asked in a long time. And he said to me, knowing my background, he said, well, why are you doing this? And I thought, that is a very intelligent question. Nobody else has asked me that. But he had to ask me a bloody question I couldn't answer satisfactorily. I don't think I answered it actually at that point. I thought the only way I'm going to show through my actions, because I can't actually articulate why I'm doing it. But I just thought, there's a man with insight. And from that moment, I thought, yeah, we have to have him as our caseworker.
Yeah, well, there was a reason why I asked that. I spoke to you guys and obviously saw your background. And for me, in this kind of business that I'm in at the moment, money has not always been motivation for me. So it's important for me to know what was the reasoning behind, you know, everybody wanting to be involved in this foundation. It looked great. It's you know, something that I can sink my heart into and, you know, give my all. So I wanted to know the reasoning behind it. You know, even for the organization I work for, I still question the motives and their morals about what it is they do and why. Because, you know, if I feel like I'm giving everything to this for my own reasons, I'd rather be doing it with people that genuinely have more than just figures or some sort of outcome, you know, more to somebody who wants to know more about why and what is going on here. Because every day, for me, I learn all the time about what it is that gets people into these situations. I look at my own life, my own upbringing, and look at how, you know, in hindsight, this stuff happened. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's important for me to know that people that I'm working with or their agendas are the same as mine. Otherwise, I couldn't work in that environment. And for me, I've looked a lot about, I always do look at the young people that I work with now, people that I know personally, you know, look at families and look at cultures and stuff. And I realize that, you know, poverty is not necessarily a reason behind certain violence or certain crime statistics in a country even, or in a city. So I have to look more past that, because we've seen studies and stuff about the poorest countries in the world, and, you know, some of the more wealthiest. And you look at the murder rate per capita, 100,000, and some of the poorest countries in the world, they have a very low murder rate. So it can't be due to poverty. And so I have to look more into what is it in what goes on in some of these countries or some of these cities that you know, we have these issues going on. And I've realized and seen that culture has a lot to do with it. Rupert and I had a conversation once, and I was telling Rupert about, you know, how I was brought up and how I was brought up by a single mum. I've got 2 brothers. And I guess she was trying to make sure that, you know, we were tough and able to stand up for ourselves and stuff like that. So, you know, it wasn't acceptable to sort of back down from a confrontation or, you know, an issue. You know, even if it's a fight situation, I wasn't told, unlike Rupert, his mum told him, you know, if you get into a situation, if you can leg it. You know, mine was the complete opposite. If I legged it, and I, you know, my mum found out, oh, this happened, I got punched in the face. And she didn't want to, what's the leg it part? What did you do about it? That was the question, not how's your lip? You know what I'm saying? It was always like, you know, what did you do about it? So, yeah, and I think ours was like, you know, my mum's one was, you know, if somebody, you know, bullies you or takes advantage of you, if you don't do something about it, it will continue happening. That was her thing. So, you know, it was I guess, you know, not having a dad around and stuff like that, she was just trying to make sure that, you know, we could survive.
Yeah, survival.
Yeah, and
there's an element of truth in that too, isn't there's an element of truth, but it's just but it's how far do you take it is the
how far do you take it. So that's what it is.
Right.
Because I mean, even with my own children, you know, you want them to be able to go out into the world, and you're not always going to be there to chase after them and sort things out for them. So it's a mindset of understanding that, you know, you have to deal with situations. Confrontation doesn't always mean a physical confrontation. Sometimes it can just be a level of assertion. You know, you're gonna, you know, stand up for what you believe in, or things like that. But so there is a way, there is a understanding to it. I mean, going to school, when I started, like, you know, secondary school, and I went to a boys' school. It was a pretty rough school. It's changed a lot now, but at the time, it was like, you know, pack animal mentality and stuff. So the first day in school, everybody's trying to, you know, find out who's who in the school. So the first few days in school, there were a lot of fights in school, because that was what everyone was sort of testing, and it really does work out better for you if you do stand up for yourself. Believe it or not. I mean,
yeah.
Trying to hide or run away from it is not gonna be beneficial. So my thought process was already like, you know, well, if it's gonna happen, if it's happening, if fight's taking place, then make the most of it, sort of thing. So you make an example out of that first fella, and it might save you a lot of other fights. And funny enough, that mindset worked. I guess it prepared me for even when I was in prison, because it was a boys' school that I went to. I then went on to prison, which was like a big boys' school, just like locked in. And
a boarding school.
Yeah. So a lot of the same cultures, if you like, exist in those environments. And you can be, you know, through my term in prison, I saw a lot of people that were victims, and I've seen, you know, things happen to people, and you know, you haven't got anybody that's going to come and rescue you in those situations. And I look at those people, and I was, at that time, I guess I was thankful of the way I was brought up, you know, in terms of surviving that sort of thing. I was never, you know, a victim. Not that I was a perpetrator, but, you know, I saw people that were victimized and stuff throughout their sentences and stuff, in all sorts of ways. So, you know, in some ways, I was equipped to handle and deal with situations. But in terms of the culture, I think why I'm so, at the moment, stuck on culture so much is because you know, with social media and stuff now, I could be in my bonnet talking about, you know, the young people that are all into you know, the Snapchats and the Instagrams and all of these live stuff that they do, because so many people, like, peer pressure has always been a massive issue for young people when you're trying to sort of find yourself as a person. You know, you're not really happy with the way you look, you know, your build, or the clothes that you wear, you know, the money you earn. You don't, you know, you're giving pocket money at that young age. So these young people are so influenced and by their peers anyway. And I think social media has turned that up and amplified that to the 10th power, because it's making everybody be able to see more of what used to be going on in school. Maybe somebody's smoking, or you're talking about young people talking about sex, and, you know, everyone's like, oh, haven't you had sex yet? Everybody be like teasing you. But now, because of this social media stuff and that, now people are acting up and proving themselves, trying to prove themselves to, I don't know, 4,000 followers that they don't even know, and seeking validation from, you know, it happens to grown people, much less young people. So I think with the culture what's going on, especially in some of the communities, and that they've got like acidic communities, I'd like to call them, because of the culture, because, you know, everybody needs to, nothing's okay to have as a young person. I mean, when we were young, when I first started driving cars, you know, we'd drive Fiestas and old Escorts, or, you know, little cars that were all affordable sort of cars and that. Whereas young people now, in this sort of fast-paced lifestyle, they want to leave school and drive a brand new car out of a showroom, which was something you'd never even think about doing. Hadn't even been in a showroom before, a proper showroom. So this is where they are, and it's a hard act to follow. If this, and I'm using the car as just a sort of example, but in everything that they do, everything's accelerated and everything's speeded up, and it's like, if you've gone from, you know, having a brand new Mercedes at 18 or 17, and then by 19, that Mercedes, you can't afford it, or it's gone back, or whatever the case may be. It's so, I've seen it so many times where that person will do desperate things to keep up with you know, the Joneses, if you like. And it can happen across the board in terms of clothing, reputation. They push themselves beyond sensible sort of reasoning because of the peer pressure that they put themselves in. And I think if you haven't been taught, or, you know, you haven't been guided into understanding yourself and understanding what is important from what's not important and stuff like that, and you don't have that sort of solid background behind you, you can get into that scenario and that situation and be led or just go astray very quickly. So cultures and understanding cultures is important. And I think I brought Rupert over to my estate because I wanted him to, my estate is where I grew up on, and that, because I wanted him to sort of not just see or me talk about it, but when he was there, you can look and feel the environment that you're in. And it's even changed a lot from since when I was there, but you still got a sense of how people were living on top of each other. You can understand, you know, for a young person growing up, I mean, I think I had the best time ever. And I wouldn't have really changed that upbringing in terms of the community and that sense of belonging when you grow up in a big housing estate like that in London or wherever I can imagine wherever in the world, because people are all of the similar income. You know, the young people, you're allowed to play out. It's heavily pedestrianised, so no vehicles drive through there. You can't get like knocked over as a kid. So we were allowed to play out. Everyone's sort of at their windows looking out the window. So everybody sees over everybody, and you grow up in that environment. So we could be playing, I don't know, 40 or, you know, whatever we play, and there'd be easily 40, 50 kids playing out. So there's plenty of people to play football teams, and whatever we were playing outside, there was plenty of kids that were out to play. And then, you know, you grow up in that community, you live so close to each other. I'm sure even in households, some people on the estate, as you saw, Rupert, they live closer together than people that live in the same house in some circumstances.
There's two things that I found interesting, because Shaun was saying we used to run around here playing 40-40. And I used to play that at my first boarding prep school at the age of 8. And I thought, that's really interesting. That
I used to play that. Great game.
is played right across the social divide.
Yeah.
I'd like to take this moment to introduce to you our sponsor, Flexi, the must-have app to track and manage your subscriptions in one place. So most of us have multiple subscriptions nowadays for things like streaming services, gym memberships and food deliveries. These are great and take the hassle out of buying everyday products that we consume regularly, but it can be hard to keep track of them. That's where Flexi comes in handy, using super secure technology to connect your accounts to see all your subscriptions in a single dashboard, putting you in control of your spending. And what's more, Flexi's subscription marketplace allows you to discover new products you may love, all easy to pause, resume or cancel in a swipe or two. So give Flexi a try. It's free to download from the App Store, or check out their website at www.flexyapp.uk. That's FLEXY app.uk. Back to the podcast.
But the other thing is that over time, listening to what Shaun was saying about his upbringing and what it was like there, and the changes that have been made since you were a child, and going into those blocks and thinking they put a lot of security measures in to keep the people safe in the blocks. Once you're in the block, you feel like you're in a prison.
Yeah.
The security measures, are they keeping people out, or are they making the people who live there prisoners in their own homes? That was my gut feel as I travelled around the shore.
Yeah.
So are they protected? Is it? I guess if it's in a particular area or estate, is that?
Well,
like the gang side of things, is it kind of operate? Is it they protect the estates or?
Okay, well, I said to Rupert because in Peckham, for example, where I come from, there was about 3 very big housing estates, and they were all joined together. So there'd be different housing estates, but they, for some reason, bridged them. There was always a bridge that connected them. And you're talking in one block, 4 floors, 120 homes. This is like an average block. He had bigger ones, but 120 homes, 3-bed to 4-bed households. So if you can multiply that, and you'd find, and that's like one block, and there's hundreds of blocks joined together. So you're all on top of each other doing that, and you're growing up, like I said, there'd be a lot of children outside playing, and you literally grow up next to each other in each other's gardens. There's a fence separating it, but it's almost like one big estate or one big garden. But where we played out was our garden. So we'd grow up there and become young adolescents into teenage years, and there'd be events. So there'd be like big parks that were public parks, and they'd have what we'd call all-dayers in those days, like it's like almost like a festival where there'd be like bouncy castles, maybe music playing, food selling, and all sorts of merchandise and stuff selling, and that's where everybody used to go on a bank holiday. Say they'd hold these events. So by early teens, if there was going to be a fun fair or these all-dayers in these parks, naturally it would be like, oh, you go, everyone be talking, you're going to the park tomorrow, you're going to the park, yeah, okay, wait for me, not for me. And easily by 12 o'clock in the afternoon, could have 15, 20, depending, 30, who's got to do chores or who's got to go shopping with their mum or whatever. But you could easily walk across these roads to this park with 15, 20 people, normally boys. So in walking over there, we're going over there to have fun. But at the time when you're walking out as a young person and stuff, and this is sort of when you start to encounter the police or, other situations, because on site, people look and thought, wow, it's a gang. And I said this to Rupert because we were called the Gloucester Grove Boys, not because it's a coined phrase or, a cool gang name. That was the name of our estate. So you came from that estate, that Gloucester Grove Boys. My estate was called Gloucester Grove Estate. And you can see that on YouTube if you want to have a look and see what it looks like. But so going over to the park, nobody formed a gang. There was not a gang, like we wore the same jackets or so in definition we were just friends going over to the park. And that would materialize. Sometimes you go to the park, they have a great time, talk to girls, play, have fun, come back. Some occasions a fight might happen for whatever reason. Now, if this is the culture side of things. So if I'm in a park and for whatever reason I get into an argument or some sort of fisticuffs with some boy, he might be from another estate, which is a park surrounded by big estates. He might be from another estate, and we could get into a fight. Now, if I am fighting and I'm managing, it's a one-on-one fight. Everyone will stand around, nobody joining. We could have a one-on-one straightener.
Yep. Straightener, I like it.
Over and done with. But
sometimes, you know, the old, you know, wipe your mouth and get on with it. They started dying out from those ages there. So I could have a punch up, might get the better of somebody, but because of an audience and because of, you know, there's an audience here now. There's the park, everybody's gathered around. That person might not accept defeat in you know, a way that's. So what might happen is sometimes they might make the mistake afterwards, decide, oh, let's go and get him, because they know what estate we've come from, and then come over to our estate to fight. It might not be me, might be somebody else. But that would be the biggest mistake of your life, because it's like turning up at, I don't know, to go and fight a guy who's got 15 brothers or something, and you're going to turn up at his house and fight him, like, you know. So they'll be over there and they'll be like, no, let's have a one-on-one. In the park, it was more of a mutual ground, but now you're on the estate. So we say, all right then, but there's no way my guy is going to lose on this estate. And, you know, even if he's came up, this fellow might have came over with a few of his friends, they have a fight, and it's all okay as long as my guy is getting the better of him. Once he starts getting the better, then the feet start coming in, the kicks and the boots start coming in, and those sort of things can escalate.
Yeah,
so
of course.
You're going to do that, and then they'll end up getting all beaten up, or they'd run off or whatever. And then, you know, another time we share these parks. They used to have adventure playgrounds. I don't know if you guys are familiar with adventure playgrounds and stuff. They used to have go-karting stuff over there. So all the different boys from the estate used to go over to the same parks and stuff like that. But I'm just giving you an example of how
it happens.
This sort of thing starts to grow, and without even having the mindset of understanding or forming gangs officially. So people, it's not like, you know, cut your wrist and put the blood together and we're, you know, we're blood brothers and we're in this gang, this enterprise, financial gain or anything like that. It never ever started like that. Things are a little bit different now because, you know, I think when people use the phrase gangs for a lot of boys, I mean, some of the boys now, they're growing up in residential areas. They're not coming from big housing estates, and they're literally joining allegiances with other boys that they never grew up with even, you know, just to be in a gang, whereas ours was quite different. And I was saying about the cultures and where they stem from, because even though my mum wasn't born in this country, she's from Jamaica. So, you know, and Jamaica has a lot of Hasidic communities as well, in terms of cultures and mindsets. Reasoning and understanding goes out the window. A lot of ignorance is sort of, how can I say, it's almost celebrated in a way in which you deal with situations and stuff. So if we're having a conversation and I don't like what you said to me, it doesn't matter if, you know, what you said to me is right or, you know, a reasonable statement to make. From those communities, I will just go off and then disrespect you rather than listen to you tell me anything. Because you, as whoever you are, you can't tell me anything. That's the mindset.
Right. Yeah, it's irrelevant what they're saying. It's totally irrelevant.
Yeah. That culture, because I mean, Johnson can tell you, he knows that culture can go and escalate into any situation you like. If you think about the principles of the understanding or the lack of understanding. So, you know, violence is something that, you know, you'll see from a young age, or you'll see readily. So violence isn't something that's abnormal.
You get conditioned. It's just normal. Yeah. And actually, the other point you made is that, you know, these young boys, you know, they're getting deeper and deeper into, you know, it starts as friends, but as they get deeper and deeper, and the retaliation, and where do you stop? You're almost sucked in deeper and deeper and deeper, and then how do you get out? Johnson, did you have anything to comment on that?
I mean, what Shaun say about the gang culture today is different to how he grew up. I think he kind of relate to me in a sense, because Shaun grew up on a big estate and it was about the friends, and one fight led to the other. With me, I used to have that in Grenada in school. I go in school, I fight in school, go back the next day, and I go and see the principal. but we'll fight again in the afternoon.
That's great.
So, but coming to England for me was a different culture. I didn't have that friends what Shaun grew up with over here. I had family, but it was not the same. So I think when I start gaining friends, whatever they was doing is what I would do, not knowing that the direction I was heading. And I think he made it a lot easier for me to get out because I didn't grow up in the culture over here.
Okay.
My culture in Grenada is slightly, well, it's far, far, far from the culture I end up in. Because I always say back home, in Grenada, is more the elderly that smoke. And when people smoke home, you know, they just smoke weed, that's it. You don't know nothing else. Over here, the first club I went to, I was introduced to speed. I didn't even know what it was. And everyone was crazy out of their head going like this. And I'm like, they are crazy. So I could relate to that part of Shaun's story. So I came in on the later part because I was old when I get into that culture. I was 19. At 19, you're looking to come out. I mean, you're out of the door a long time. 15 probably is the cutoff point. So I came in, but I'm talking 99. So it's a far cry. The distances compared to today. Probably 19 was acceptable. Now they would call me an old grandpa at 19 in the culture. So yeah, I could relate to that side of it.
Okay. And as far as culture, one thing I'm interested in is does the racial side have anything to do with it or nothing to do with it? Because we've already debunked one myth that you don't have to be from, a marginalized background to actually get into any gang violence. It can be you just want your short-term gain of material things, and the illegal route is the most efficient way to achieve those things. But does race come into it at all, or not?
Well, personally, coming into this country as an immigrant, you would think I would have that problem. I never had this problem up to today. Even in the job I do in the military, I've been 20 years in the military, and I never experienced anything racial. So. That don't mean to say I haven't seen it, but personally, it never happened to me. So on that side, I've been, I could say, pretty lucky. Or I don't see color. So probably because I don't see color, I never had an issue.
Yeah, I mean, for me, in terms of getting, if race had anything to do with me getting into the kind of lifestyle that I got into, no. It didn't necessarily have an impact on that. I mean, when I was, young boy in Peckham, those days, Peckham, I don't know if you're familiar with the Old Kent Road or Bermondsey or any of those sort of areas there, but they were like very racist sort of areas and stuff. But Peckham borders Bermondsey. But in those days, as a kid, there was still some elements. I remember older white boys that used to live on the estate, a lot older than me, that used to say stuff. I didn't even know what they were saying, to be honest with you. It's only as I grew up older, they used to say. But by the time we got to a sort of physical age, I had a couple of issues in that. But at that time, violence was. I'd already punched a grown man in his face and knocked him out. So I was quite handy, and I wasn't afraid of so if I was ever challenged or racially abused and all that would normally be the outcome of that, but it didn't happen often.
And also where I'm coming from too is the I think Rupert touched on an interesting point when we drove up to Yorkshire last week. It was about how certain cultures, whether you're from Jamaica or Grenada or Somalia or whatever, that there's a real great support network for those communities, and I was also just curious to know whether the violence was a racial thing or more of a cultural thing, whether it's an estate thing. So that's kind of where I'm coming from as far as how that does it even. It sounds like it doesn't play a role at all,
in my time, it was not about race. It was about, you know, what you're doing. If you end up in a fight, it doesn't matter what color it is. It's a fight, and if it grow, it don't grow because it's race or color. It grow because you want to win, and you have to hold the respect. So,
but there is an element of in all sort of violence like this. It's an element of tribalism. When you go back to the 1930s, you had football gangs who would fight each other. You had gangs fighting in Brighton, and you had the mods and rockers who would fight each other. You've always had people who associate with a group who want to. Even in my school, because I went to a private school I went to in Sherborne, if we were caught on your own coming, because we go away for the weekend every so often, you get the late train back, you had to walk through the town. If some local lads saw you, oh look, there's a King's School cad, and they'd be after us. But that's why we all played rugby and ran, because we could always outrun them, because they were all sitting around smoking and very unhealthy. And so we just, but again, it was this tribal thing where you're not part of my gang. You're from one school and I'm from another school.
yeah.
And if we're going to do you over.
So am I right in understand? So okay, so Rupert's comment about tribal. Are we talking an estate or a postcode in today's world in London?
Yeah.
That's more what kind of brings people together versus it doesn't matter what background you come from.
Because I mean, don't get me mistaken. My estate wasn't just filled up with black boys and that. So there was white guys we grew up with as well on my, you know, and even now, if you find that in gangs, you will find, if you know, you could easily go on YouTube and type in, there will be white boys among these boys as well. If you've grown up on an estate, you've grown up in the same way.
Yeah.
Just like I don't know if you know of a comedian, they call him White Yardy, but he's from Peckham, but he's Jamaican. So
Okay.
I mean, if you see him, if you know any Jamaican people and you see Harry and what he talks about and how he talks, that's how he is, because he grew up in Jamaica, in a community. So if you grew up on my estate as a white boy that grew up on the estate, and you hang around with a lot of black guys, and people might say, "Oh, you're speaking like you're black." Well, you probably will, because that's all that means. I mean, from what I see the difference is now, there was still the culture. Why I say the culture is so important in this is because I could, you know, once fights started to get out of hand, I mean, a fight, you could always grow up and think, oh, we had a straightener once, that's all right, shake hands and it's all good. But once stabbing and gets involved and things like that, then it's like, well, you tried to kill me, or you did kill my brother or my cousin or whoever. That you can't get, and that doesn't get forgotten. You know, when I was a kid, I could have a fight. As many people that I had fights with, those days they would still have, like, you know, just straighteners and that. And I could shake hands, or people could shake hands with me afterwards, because it was a one-on-one straight fair fight. If, for example, you know, which happened before, where I've come around the corner and I've seen one guy that I had problems with, and he's with 12 of his friends. You know, when I see him on his own, he didn't want to fight me. Now he's with 12 of his friends, and they all tried to rush me or something and that. I would never be in respect or respectful to that person. I would never see him and be like, all right, you done me fair and square. No, because it was 12 of you. So there will never, ever be a time when I feel like, you know, I've got a respect for you, or there's a mutual respect between us, because it was never a fair situation and that. So that retaliation will always happen. Now, once it's gone to that, and you've sort of like taken the gloves off and done something like that, now I will get, you know, my friends as well, and we'll go over to that estate or over to wherever, prepared to do whatever it is we come to do. And that's because once you take, I mean, those days, if I saw somebody that I had issues with, maybe walking up the high street with their mum shopping or something on a Saturday, even though I've got a serious situation with them, because they're with their mum, I'll maybe eyeball them and keep walking past. Nowadays, that because of the breakdown in culture, those kids will kick your mum to the ground as well as you.
Really?
I know of a young, this is like with over in East London, is an Asian community. There's a lot of stuff going on over there as well. And one mum was with her son, and she's seen these boys that he's in beef with, and they pulled knives out on him. He was running around her, and they stabbed him to death in front of his mum. Mm-hmm. So once things like that start to happen, older cousins or older brothers, when you see extreme violence happening, or some young kid who's been stabbed to death on the street and he's been stabbed 20 times, and you think, cool, you know, he's only 17 years old. Sometimes you don't know what they've done. You know what I'm saying? These boys will come to your mum's house now, knock the door, your mum opens the door, and they'll come in and they'll do whatever they want to do. You know, so that culture side of things is where the breakdown has gone, because that would not happen before. Now,
so it's getting worse. It's getting worse.
And once you've gone to a certain level, there's murders now. Boys are not even fighting anymore because of the whole peer pressure side of things as well. Like I told you, you can have a fight in prison lots of times. I could have a situation, and I got out having fights with a lot of people simply because when there was an audience, people will act up and stuff. A lot of the times, I'd call somebody into a cell, get someone to hold the door so they wouldn't lock us in, but they could just pull the door shut, and we can have this sort this out. There's not an audience. There's no one to act up in front of. No one even going to stop it until it's finished. I know them 9 times out of 10. I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight. That's what happens in that, because, yeah, I mean, this person doesn't want to do it because now there's no audience. There's no one to stop it. It's a real man-to-man situation, and a lot of them are not really. They haven't even grown up being, you know, men and having that one-on-one, that man-to-man physical fight. So what happens now? You got the culture where people will ridicule you online. So now, even you might, I don't know if you've seen much of these videos, but now, even in prison, out on the street, somebody gets caught by their opposition. They will now film you to further humiliate you and post that online.
Yeah.
So, you know, and everyone will laugh. Even if you had a straightener in those days and someone got the better of you, it wouldn't be something that's like embarrassing enough. But now, they call it taking the L.
They can take it to public humiliation.
Yeah, and you know, the fear of that in itself will push people to do the most. It's gone so far now with these gangs now that if I attack one of you guys on your estate or something, they'll be on your estate or where you live, where you claiming, the postcode you're claiming, and film themselves live outside your house or at your road. I'm here, where is he? And be posting this, and people be commenting. There'll be like 400 people in there commenting, oh yeah, this guy's running scared, or whatever the case may be, you know. And that pushes people into doing things because your credibility now, because you've built your credibility on these platforms.
Wow.
You know,
it's tough, but it's really tough to ignore it, isn't it? You can't ignore it. You know, if that's your lifestyle, is I've got to keep my front up.
Exactly why I said culture is really important.
Was there a defining moment for you to actually turn things around? What inspired you to join the Johnson Beharry VC Foundation? And can we talk about the solution, you know, for these young people that are in this, you know, environment that is like a downward spiral? How do we help these people?
Well, first of all, I think I'll start with the situation. If people are in a situation at the moment, I think it is to look at your peers, look at your surroundings, try to get to know yourself and understand what it is you want for yourself rather than what anyone else talks about. Try to be honest and non-biased about your beliefs and what you want. Think about your family, those that actually love you, the ones that actually do care. Proven, that might be your mum, you know, or your dad, who you might not have that much respect for because you know some of these boys, they talk so disrespectful to their parents and stuff. But to really look, because some people don't understand what loyalty and real love from people that love them is. They don't recognize it. So if you see some young people, you'll find they'll put their life on the line for the guy that they've met or known from, I don't know, they might have met them in prison, they might have met them anywhere, or, you know, and you've now formed an allegiance with them, but you're riding out with these people to commit maybe murders or do some, stabbings or serious violence and stuff. But going against, the wishes of your parents, people that whoever your guardian was, that really loves you and has nurtured you all to this way, whichever way they have done it, they've been there. And you're now pledging your allegiance to somebody that I think they should question who and what it is they have around them. Question it honestly in terms of, is that person really my friend? Is this situation really worth it? Before they get too deeply involved. Because a lot of people get themselves into situations, and I guarantee if they do survive it, if they've been given a sentence of 20 or 25-year recommended sentence by the judge, which means they have to serve that sort of sentence. Even if you were 15-year-old and you had a certain mindset, I guarantee you, before you've reached halfway point of your sentence, you would have matured and have a different understanding about life. So it's important that you try to look at, even at a young age, because my thing is that young people, you're inexperienced in your life skills, the life experience is too short for you to understand certain things. You've got to give yourself time to get to know and understand yourself and what life and friendships and meaning of all these things are. Because if you're already in a situation and you want to get out, there are services. You need to speak to somebody. You need to speak to, maybe if you're at school, a teacher. Some schools have safeguarding teachers, and tell them they can find services out there that you can go and talk to people like myself, or in the same sort of industry, that may be able to help you get out of certain situations in terms of. But the reason why I keep going back to mindsets and cultures so much, and that is because a lot of people say they can't do this, they can't get out of that, because, for example, if somebody's threatening you that you're going to give me some money or give me this or whatever, or I'm going to stab you after school, I'm going to stab you. There is help. There is people, you could tell your teachers, you could call the police. But because of the culture, because of that mindset, if you call the police, you're a grass, or you're a snitch, or you're this and that and the other.
Yep.
And they won't. So, when I say about the cultures, I've got a real big issue with young kids in school, primary school, early secondary school kids that talk about, they use phrases like no face, no case. You'll see them take pictures and they do pictures like this, no face, no case. Yeah. I'm not a snitch, I'm not a snitch. And I'm like, when you define, I said, give me the definition of what you call a snitch. Because for me, the definition isn't just talking to the authorities or talking to your teacher makes you a snitch. If, for example, I run into the local off license or corner shop down the road and rob the shop at gunpoint, that person whose shop it is, law-abiding citizen, shopkeeper, he's going to call the police, and he's going to give them any evidence that he can that gets me to get me arrested or caught and stuff. Yeah, that person is not a snitch or a grass, because he hasn't entered into any agreement with anybody that he's a gangster, criminal, of any sort of fraternity that is on the opposite side of the law. So he's supposed to call the police. If he saw somebody, dragging away a young girl into a car, you're gonna call the police, give the registration, give the things in that. Yeah, that's a upstanding citizen, a law-abiding citizen. That's not a grass or a snitch or an informer or whatever they want to call it. Somebody who's joined into criminal enterprises for monetary gain or whatever it is, knowing consequences and understanding that, if this goes wrong, this is going to happen, then gets arrested, then decides to tell the police, all of his friends that are all doing this and that and the other, yes, you can consider that person a snitch, because like in the mafia, when they got into these sort of enterprises and then they got caught, then they decide to get everyone else nicked to get themselves a lesser sentence or whatever the case may be. That's what it is. So when young people are out here saying no face, no case, and I'm not a snitch, I'm not a snitch, what you're actually doing is criminalizing yourself before you're actually even doing criminal activity. You're taking on the persona of a criminal. And then once you say that stuff in front of people as well, I'd never snitch, I would never do this, I would never do that. Now that you're threatened with someone stabbing you after school, You'll want to tell the teacher, you'll want to call the police, but because of the peer pressures that you've put yourself in, they won't. And a lot of the times they don't. And if they do, they say it to you. If I tell, they're going to call me a snitch. So you'd rather be stabbed to death, you know, but because they've put themselves into these kind of positions, this is why I say the culture is so important that you.
This comes back to something that before you joined, we were talking about consequential thinking. Is, if I do this, what's the upside and what's the downside? And here you've got a prima facie case where somebody has said, if I tell anybody that somebody's threatening me, going to kill me, they haven't measured up and weighed up the upsides versus the downsides. All they can see is the downside and call the switch. Yeah. But the real, as you quite rightly point out, the real downside is somebody's going to stick a knife in. And one of the other things we've got going against us, I think, is biology is not on our side, because typically the human brain isn't fully developed till you're about 25. We can all apply logic to situations. The trouble is, we cannot assume that a 15 or 16-year-old lad will apply that same logic, because his synapses are still rewiring themselves, and he's still coming to terms with a whole load of things that his brain is, because the brain's rewiring itself, and they're trying to have to make sense of a world that beforehand was very easy for them. But, you know, up to that point, you believed everything your parents told you. You took for granted that what you were told was the truth. Now you've got some, as you start to develop your logic, you can realize that your mother or your father have been lying through their teeth for the past 13 years in order to get, as you see it, in order to do. And you see, well, I was manipulated when I was younger in order to drive my behavior.
Yeah.
Now I'm independent. I know what's best for me. You can't tell me what to do, because their brain is doing that.
Yeah.
But the problem is to try and get them to be introspective and say, well, actually, and understand, well, my brain is still developing, and therefore, even though I think I've made the right decision, it may well be the wrong decision because I haven't applied the right thought process. They're not going to agree with that because they're finding this new mental independence.
So in layman's terms, that's new. They need role models and mentors to help them see the other side. And as Shaun said, they also need to reach a point where, you know, is this what I want? And then you know, but even given the idea to look around them, I mean, when you're in it, how are you going to even see that you're doing something? You know, how are you going to see there's a different life?
What was the turning point for you, Shaun?
Well, I don't know if it was even so much of a turning point, because although I got, you know, went to prison for like serious violence and stuff like that, I did have, you know, business mind before I went to prison, and I was quite a sensible person, believe it or not. So a lot of the things that I got into, you know, I didn't go to prison for drugs or robbery or anything like that. I went to prison for firearms offences for, you know, wounding with intent. And so even in that was in retaliation, which for me wasn't a wrongdoing, if you like. You understand what I'm saying? So even for what I went to prison for, it was sort of at first, I guess, difficult for me to be remorseful, because I was aggressed by somebody first, you know, and that's why that retaliation situation happened, you know, and that's just the way of the world as far as I knew, you know what I'm saying, at that time and stuff. So, you know, for them, it was like, to me, they grasped on me, because these people actually had firearms themselves, had sent people after me, you know, before.
I've been kind of just sitting here quietly because I think for me, it's really interesting just to kind of digest everything you're saying. And because from what I know about it, it's mainly been fueled by the media. And I've only seen all of it from that sort of one perspective of it. And it's really interesting to hear kind of about how you guys have grown up with it, the groups, the role models, and particularly the social media influence that is actually influencing all of this kind of activity. So, I mean, that's why I've just kind of been sitting and really trying to digest it and understand it. But one actually question I'd like to ask is, where would you say that social media, and sort of particularly the media, has had an influence on the gang culture? Because obviously I see that one perspective from them, but from what I'm hearing from you guys, there's so much more to it in terms of how it actually works. And the families and the bringing and kind of the role models that you have. Would you be able to comment on that?
I think Shaun covered that in quite lengthily by mentioning how members use social media to humiliate others.
It was more covering, like, for example, from the TV side and that sort of
on the
BBC
TV side,
News,
well,
that sort of media,
side, Well, for the TV side, if something happened, let's use Peckham as an example because Shaun mentioned it so many times. If something happened in Peckham, the media wouldn't say John Smith did X, Y, and Z. They're going to say the black boy from Peckham. So then they categorize everyone. They put everyone in the same group. So he wouldn't be a black or white or a Chinese or Asian person. He would be. They would use that actual category and put everyone in the same group instead of naming the person what they did.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
on the other side, no one buy the papers if anything positive in it. So if I was to be on the front page talking about the good work we do with the JBVC Foundation, you would think the papers would people would really want to read about what I'm doing to help in the community. No, they wouldn't buy the papers. But if they see me on the front page with something negative, you don't have to be true, people will grab the paper.
We are a nation of 68 million individuals, but nobody wants us to be individuals anymore. They want us, it's all about identity politics. So if I am who I am, so I'm Rupert, posh upbringing, ex-public school, now I must wear some pink corduroy trousers, for example.
But the media created it as well, because I don't know, I didn't grow up in the 50s or the 60s. Back then, a group of guys never was classed as gang. Now, if two young person walk in together, they will be labeled as gang member. So, it's society today, the media and people in general creating this bubble.
Back in the 60s, we had the mods and the rockers. There were different motorcycle gangs who would fight each other. They would go down to Brighton on the bank holiday, specifically going to beat the shit out of each other. And I know when I first started riding a motorbike, when I was sort of 18 years old, there were lots of pubs where I couldn't go into because I was a motorcyclist. There would be signs on the door saying, no motorcyclists here, because the association was that if you were on a motorbike, you must be associated with some form of gang, Hells Angels, mods, rockers, or whatever. Now you don't get that.
But you get that with football now. You cannot go in a pub and loads of different team in that pub talking about their team because everyone team is the best team.
Yeah. So at some point, but the trouble is we get assigned to, so this identity politics where they pick up a couple of characteristics about you and immediately lump you into a group.
Yeah.
But I maintain very strongly we're a nation of 68 million individuals. And I'm with Martin Luther King on this. He also said you should judge a man by their character, not their characteristics. And we've forgotten to do that. We've forgotten to do it.
It's a really good message. So, Johnson, before you go, if you were to leave our listeners with one piece of advice.
What I would say, is think for yourself. Think for yourself and don't let others think for you. And remember, anything you want in life, you would achieve it, but you have to work for it. Nothing in life comes easy.
So, Shaun, I was going to ask you the same questions, actually. If you were to give someone some advice, if there's one bit of advice you could give our listeners or someone in a situation that is pretty tough to get out of, what would that be?
One bit of advice, there's so many other factors involved and stuff, but I think what Johnson said just second and again about understanding and knowing yourself and doing what it is you want to do. I always say to people, if you're on that bad path, it's your decision. Well, the consequences when they do come, at least you made those decisions yourself, and you found yourself. If you feel that you're under pressure or under duress from anybody, or question yourself, really question what it's really about, and make up your own decision about what you want to do. Don't feel pressured or feel like you have to do something to please others and stuff, because you will find later on in life, or if you're in custody, or even if you're dead, that those people all gone about their business and do what it is they need to do. I think just saying it like that, it's a lot, it sort of trivializes the depth of some of the situations people are in. But in all honesty, I think in terms of a solution for something that is so entrenched and evolved, as I've told you, it's evolved negatively over the years from when I was a kid. I think, we or people need to spread that culture again to understanding about the nurturing, and to sort of cut out the negative narrative around, what we do and what we do with our young children, and, what we want in life and how we obtain it. I think if we start from a very young age and nurture those young people, that eventually cultures will change, and people will get back to how they were in terms of respecting life and respecting their futures and respecting the parents and other people that they affect with their actions and stuff. So if that understanding is taught to young people and implemented a lot more, I think that generation will fade out. Okay. And I think that is the best solution in regards to getting through this stuff.
So what's your that's really good advice. What's your vision for Johnson Beharry VC Foundation? Where do you want to see the charity go in the next 5 years?
Well, I met with Rebecca, who's a member of the trustees, this week, and we've been talking about finding out ways in which we can sort of expand on what it is that we do. So in terms of, we get referrals, people that are in custody, and go in and meet them and stuff. It's an intervention process and stuff. And it's sometimes you're going against a system that isn't, open or set up to sort of allow you to freely make these adjustments with these people. So I've been talking to Rebecca, and I've mentioned briefly to Rupert, I guess, about where we could go with this project, and the idea that we can help young people and have a more impactful change in their life by sort of acquiring maybe even a premises or something, even if we can get it. This is what we've been talking about. If we can get some sort of premises where we can have training sort of enterprises alongside a bolt-on of like the JBVC's work, like what I do with them, like the one-to-one key working and mentoring and understanding. But to have enterprises where we have like training, so because to me it's a lot more holistic in terms of if you're working with a young person, you've got to get to know where the background is that they come from, their parents, and all of this sort of stuff. So I'm talking about starting to try and get venues where we can have training sessions, mentoring sessions, all under sort of one roof, or have people come in there and develop something else more than just sort of like the signposting and trying to point people in a direction, rather, what I'm saying? So something that we can literally give back in terms of a skill. I've got people that can do training and stuff and that, and volunteer their expertise to a degree in different fields. But I think if we've got some sort of venue, or we could use mobile venues, but I just believe that if we've got these sort of venues that we could do this together, and I think then we'd have a bit more of an impact and of the understanding and that as well for what we're doing. Okay.
You do need a mix, because if you look at the JBVC Foundation, and one of the successes, one of the major reasons for our success is that running a charitable foundation is multifaceted.
Yeah, because it's a holistic approach.
We have to have the corporate governance there. We have to get the money in. We have to reply to the tax man and do all the regulatory stuff, which is a pain in the backside. But it has to be
tell me about it.
But the people who can do that and are versed at doing that, people like me and some of the other trustees, that's why, in order for us to be successful, you need Shaun, you need me, you need Johnson as the figurehead.
Yeah.
You need all of us to work together in order for the foundation to be successful, because there are so many facets.
I'm a strong believer in sort of being like destined to sort of do some things in life and people do. I mean, I've never met you guys before. We're all having this conversation on this Zoom party now, and you know, through Rupert, through Rebecca, there's other people that I will meet. I got into this business. I've always been doing what I've been doing in my community, but getting into St. Giles and then meeting with JBVC just seems like a sort of destined thing. And I think through conversations, ideas can bloom and blossom in that, in terms of how this thing works. Like what Rupert was saying, you know, people from different backgrounds and that, you know, you can't clap with one hand. So it's like, if we can somehow bridge those gaps and stuff, and that can create
100%.
and changes in that. And I think that is exactly what is needed.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Rocket Pod. Check out the JBVC Foundation at jbvc-foundation.org.uk. Join us next week as we are joined by Joanna Baptista, award-winning social entrepreneur and TEDx speaker. Thank you as always to our awesome sponsor Flexi, who is the mecca for all your subscriptions, where you can manage, discover and switch between subscriptions on the go, all from a single dashboard. Check us out on social media at We Are Rocket Pod, and of course, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Have a great week and we'll see you next time.